HOFL community. As Commissioner of the Hall of Fantasy League, I'd like to welcome you all to the HOFL Draft. Live from Hall of Fame Village in Canton, Ohio, our 12 general managers are ready to set their picks and to set their rosters for this season. Thank you for watching and enjoy the coverage.
Thank you, Emmett, and good evening, fantasy football fans, and welcome to the Hall of Fantasy League Season 2 Draft, live from Tom Benson Stadium here in Canton, Ohio, at the Hall of Fame Village. I am glad to be with you here hosting because this is going to be one heck of a draft. This season, we go from 10 teams to 12 teams as we are doubling it all down, and you're going to see the very best in the fantasy football industry construct their teams, put them all together, and don't worry, if you want to learn about how they're putting those teams together, we're going to be talking to them throughout the draft process so you get the insights that you need to put your own fantasy football teams together. All of that coming your way right here from Canton, Ohio at the legendary Tom Benson Stadium located in Hall of Fame Village. Tonight we'll be covering each and every pick of the HOFL Draft. As the Hall of Fantasy League enters its second season, they've expanded their franchises and pool of general managers, as I said, from 10 to 12. Those of you who followed Season 1 witnessed the Atlanta Hot Wings take HOFL's first ever crown. Joe Dolan and Graham Barfield led the Hot Wings to victory, and tonight we will have both of them joining us right here at Hall of Fame Village. In addition to Joe and Graham, we also have other general managers who will be joining us right here in our broadcast booth. All other GMs will be joining us remotely to make their picks. Season 2 of the Hall of Fantasy League offers 2 contest formats, and both are free to play. Let's start with legendary lineups. This season-long contest is the reason why we're here for tonight's draft. With a $75,000 cash prize pool, you get to set your own lineups each week and have the opportunity to score bonus points when a player on your lineup is also on your team's roster. Let's take a closer look at legendary lineups.
Welcome to the Hall of Fantasy League Season 2. The NFL season kicks off soon, so now's the time to learn the basics of legendary lineups, our season-long fantasy football tiers contest. It's free to play, plus there are cash prizes. So how do you get in on the action? Step 1. Download the Hall of Fantasy League app. Step 2. Pick your favorite franchise. We have 12 teams, headed by high-profile fantasy analysts, serving as general managers of the teams. You may know them from their popular radio and TV shows as these sources for football content. Maybe it's the location, or perhaps the GM is your most trusted analyst. Either way, you'll gain exclusive access to content throughout the season. Once you pick, you're in their huddle for 16 weeks of action, so choose wisely. Next, your GM will draft the franchise roster. Sit back, check stats, and take part in some trash talk. Easy enough, right? Step 3. Here's where you come in. Each week you choose your own legends, following a tiers format to set your lineup. 1 player each from 8 tiers. Your lineup scores points based on each player's on-field performance, so yards, touchdowns, etc. add to your total. The points from your legendary lineup are combined, creating your weekly score. Here's the twist. You can double down on points when a player in your legendary lineup is also on your huddle's roster. That's it. Download the app, pick your franchise, set your lineup. Easy as 1, 2, 3. So how do you win? Score more points than the rest of your huddle to claim the cash. At the end of the season, the league will award an MVP from each of the 12 teams, with $5,000 cash for achieving the highest score. That means 12 people will walk away with $5,000 for a total of $60,000 cash. In addition to the MVPs per team, the league will also award the top 3 scorers league-wide. The highest scorer will get $9,000. The second highest scorer will get $4,500. And the third highest will get $1,500. That's $15,000 additional cash for the league-wide winners. Do you have what it takes to become a legend in the Hall of Fantasy League?
As we get closer to the start of the NFL season, another contest named Blood, Sweat, and Tears will appear within the HOFL app as a second contest. Blood, Sweat, and Tears is a week-to-week DFS-style contest with weekly cash payouts. Each week, you set your own lineup by picking 1 player from each of the 8 tiers. You can edit your lineups, gain insights, and view standings all within the HOFL app. Every week for 16 weeks, HOFL will award 3 winners with the most total points accumulated throughout the week from their lineup ranked against all contestants. Every week, first place gets $750, second place gets $500, and third takes home $250. Watch for more details inside the HOFL app. Just a week ago, the Pro Football Hall of Fame and Hall of Fame Village hosted a series of events and activations right here. In addition to the historic Hall of Fame game and Hall of Fame Enshrinement Week, Hall of Fame Village opened up its doors to the public as a world-class destination for all to enjoy. In addition to fun activities throughout its campus, Hall of Fame Village hosted a concert featuring the legendary group Journey. And immediately after that, Dave Chappelle generated plenty of laughs during his show. Hall of Fame Village is well into its second phase of a 3-phase development. Let's take a closer look at the developments here at Hall of Fame Village and learn more about Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment.
Welcome to such a great evening. My name is Michael Crawford. I'm the president and CEO of the Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment Company. We have 3 business verticals. We create great media content. We're developing environments for gaming. But most importantly, we're creating a destination right here in Canton, Ohio. And it's been amazing what our team has been able to accomplish. In partnership with the Pro Football Hall of Fame and their leader, Jim Porter, I think we're continuing to strengthen the bond and really grow together. And our capabilities are going to be endless. We are a company that established ourselves 2 years ago. We really started to execute the first quarter of the game. The Constellation Center for Excellence came to life. We finished Tom Benson Hall of Fame Stadium. We are now in the process of going into the second quarter of the game. But if you look behind me, we've now added and enhanced our Hall of Fame Village Sports Complex sponsored by Foreverlong. We welcome hundreds of thousands of youth participants in any number of sporting events. Our Center for Performance, this wonderful dome facility that we've now created, gives us year-round capacity to continue with our sporting events, but also concerts, conventions, and other kinds of activity. We're bringing to life more exciting, great assets for our guests and our fans to enjoy. And equally as important, creating a home, not only for our Hall of Famers, but for our community. And we really look forward to welcoming you back year after year to a place of honor and excellence for all of Canton, Ohio to be proud of. Thank you, and I hope you have a great time.
As Michael just said, lots going on here at Hall of Fame Village, so let's talk to him more about it right now. Joining us for tonight's draft and to tell us more about Hall of Fame Resort and Entertainment, please welcome President and Chief Executive Officer Michael Crawford. Michael, how are you? Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
Listen, I was here 3 years ago before the HOFL even existed, before all of these wonderful things took place. What has happened in addition to what we've seen in terms of expanding this out to being just a destination for many families and friends?
Yeah, well, if you were here 3 years ago, you saw a lot of houses and dirt.
Nothing there.
Now you look behind us and you see a lot of buildings, a lot of experiences. I think what happened was we really created this vision of what a company could be. And when you got access to content is gold, right?
Of course.
So this is the birthplace of professional football. Why not create experiences that are unique and different for our guests to enjoy, starting with a destination?
Absolutely. Now, in addition to this being a destination for families and friends to come enjoy everything that has to do with the Pro Football Hall of Fame, how has this league kind of expanded what people look at and maybe the excitement they get from connecting fantasy football to the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
Well, look, I think people engage with sports in many different ways, as you well know. Some people like to place bets. Some people like to go to the games. Fantasy is a multi-billion-dollar business. So clearly people want to be able to pick their teams, draft their rosters, make those trades, just like real GMs do. Well, we wanted to be a part of that.
There's no doubt about it. It's very, very cool. And being here the whole weekend, you can feel that excitement as we get ready for another big NFL season. We're going to see some future Hall of Famers get drafted here tonight. But as we kind of let you go, because we got to get into the draft.
Absolutely.
What do you want people to expect when they come to Hall of Fame Village?
Look, I think they're going to expect all the different kinds of experiences they're so engaged by and entertained by. You got concerts, you got sports betting, fantasy, you got all of these different unique concepts that they can visit and enjoy while they're here. So that's our goal.
They're going to be doing plenty of that. I got to let you go.
Absolutely.
We gotta get to the draft.
No,
Michael,
that's the most important thing. Good
Get
luck
it kicked
tonight.
off. Thank you. Good luck to
Absolutely.
everybody there. We thank Michael for joining us here. Very cool to have him here. But let's talk more about the draft, because this season, the Hall of Fame Fantasy League and all of the teams in the league have great merchandise and gear that's available in the HOFL store. It's time to support your favorite team, so go to thehofl.com and check out the store. And for a limited time, you could save 10% on HOFL merchandise by using the code SEASON2. That's SEASON2 in the checkout. Get your gear now. Okay, you know everything we're getting into. I think it's time we get started with tonight's HOFL draft. Now, prior to the start of tonight's draft, a randomized draft order was conducted and set. So now, let's meet the general managers and run down the order of tonight's draft. To get us started, the Boston Barflies will get the first pick. Dr. Roto is the GM for the Barflies. Picking second, we have the Ohio Goats, who are led by Matt Harmon, head of social media for Yahoo Fantasy. In the third spot is Lawrence Jackson Jr., analyst for NBC Sports Edge, and he will be managing one of the league's expansion teams, the New Jersey Boardwalkers. At number 4, the Denver Mile Highs are also part of the league's expansion and will be led by Melissa Jacobs, the founder of the Football Girl. Continuing to the 5th pick, we have the New York Bodega Cats under new ownership, and the general manager is Josh Hayes, the host of Rotoballer and Sirius XM Radio. Next up at number 6, we have the Chicago Hog Mollies, led by Stephanie Smalls, who is a sports gambling analyst for Champions Round. With the 7th pick, the Green Bay Winter Warriors is another new franchise. They are led by Lindsay Rhodes, the host of the NFL Roadshow podcast. Next up, and they're here with us, our defending champions, the Atlanta Hot Wings, have drawn the 8th pick. The Hot Wings are led by Joe Dolan and Graham Barfield, managing editor of Fantasy Points. The Philadelphia Powder Kegs will be next at the 9th spot, and they are led by Jeff Radcliffe, on-air talent for CBS Sports. In the 10 hole, Marcus Grant is the GM of the Los Angeles Sidekicks. Marcus hosts the Fantasy Live podcast. The Las Vegas Pocket Kings will follow at number 11, and they are led by Jeff Manns, owner of Elite Fantasy and Fantasy Guru. And finally, inaugural FSWA Hall of Famer Scott Engel and the Seattle Hayes, switching sides, will be at the turn at pick number 12. So there you go. We have 12 GMs, 18 rounds of a snake draft. Each team will have 90 seconds to make their pick. The starting lineups for this full-point PPR league will consist of 10 players, a quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, a flex, a kicker, and a defense, while the other 8 spots will make up the bench, to be used however the GM chooses. All right, you know all the particulars, you know all the GMs and the teams. Let's start the draft and season 2 of the Hall of Fantasy League. For the first overall pick, we will send it over to Dr. Roto, GM of the Boston Barflies. Dr. Roto, you're on the clock.
All righty.
Do you have this thought out? Do you know you're making your pick already, Dr. Roto?
I know my pick, and what I love about this pick is I just consider him a league winner. I know most people will go safe and conservative, maybe take Jonathan Taylor, maybe a little Christian McCaffrey, but I'm going in on Justin Jefferson. I love the Vikings this year. I think the offense goes from the dinosaur age with Mike Zimmer to the modern age with Kevin O'Connell. I think they're going to go a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. I think Jefferson is a steal, and I'm happy to take him.
Justin Jefferson, ADP around that 3-4 range, but you take him number 1 overall. Dr. Roto, thank you for your explanation there, and good luck the rest of the way. We'll check in with you in just a little bit. So there you go, folks. If you were drafting at home and have done drafts, you may not have seen Justin Jefferson in that number 1 spot, but he goes number 1 here in season 2 of the HOFL draft. That shows you how things can change, and everybody else in this draft. We talked to Joe Dolan and Graham Barfield on Instagram Live before we started. You have to react. You could do so much preparation, but then you have to change how things go, and maybe Justin Jefferson changes what the first round will look like. Let's go to Matt Harmon now, because he had pick number 2, and after we saw Justin Jefferson go, where do we see Matt go? Because this is a key. He's going to go with Jonathan Taylor. Matt, did you expect Jonathan Taylor to be sitting there for you at number 2?
No, didn't expect him to be there at number 2, but was happy to have it happen, because then I don't have to go through this debate if I have the stones, the fortitude to take Christian McCaffrey with the great workload that we know he's going to get, but the obvious injury risk, or do I go Cooper Kupp or another wide receiver, something like that. So actually, this I appreciate it, Dr. Roto. That made my life a little bit easier and a little bit stress-free.
Not often, Matt, can you say your life is stress-free at the number 2 pick, but you get off to a good start. Matt will check in with you in a little bit after a couple more picks remain, and we'll be doing that throughout the draft, everyone. We'll talk to everybody here in the first round, but as we move along, you'll be hearing from each one of the GMs to get inside their heads. Why have they constructed their teams? Have they had a process that they've been able to follow, a strategy been able to follow? Are they trying to avoid taking running backs early? Are they waiting on that quarterback? As you'll see these teams get constructed, we'll check in with all of the GMs multiple times throughout this draft. Let's move on to the 3rd pick, Lawrence Jackson Jr. He's got the New Jersey Boardwalkers, and he's going to end up with Dalvin Cook. Let's talk to him right now because we just heard Matt Harmon talking about, is it McCaffrey? I don't have to make that decision now. Lawrence, I want to ask you this. When you land here at number 3, who did you think would be there, and were you always kind of locked in on this name?
Well, I was definitely locked in on it, but once I saw Justin Jefferson go first, I was thinking to myself, well, maybe Jonathan Taylor get the 3. But at the end of the day, I had Dalvin Cook as my top running back, so I'm always good with that.
So I would assume you're happy that he just happened to land there and maybe didn't expect him to be there, even though you had him at number 1 for yourself.
Listen, I had a lot of confidence that I would get him. I'd have been shocked if I didn't.
So far through the first 3 picks, things are going to plan, at least according to their GMs. They're happy with how things have landed. I'm sure that will change throughout the draft. Lawrence will check in with you in a little bit. Let's move on to the number 4 spot, Melissa Jacobs. She's got the Denver Mile Highs, and she's going to end up with Christian McCaffrey. Melissa, we heard Matt Harmon talking about maybe taking McCaffrey with that 2nd pick. He falls to you at 4. Do you consider him falling to you at number 4?
100%. He was not even in my brain space as an option. I was going to go with someone else, and it was actually going to be pretty bold, maybe as bold as the Justin Jefferson pick at number 1, but I just couldn't turn down the upside of McCaffrey, and I'm very thankful to the Panthers for keeping him wrapped in a bubble this preseason. Please maintain that, and obviously we know the risks with him, but we know the reward also. So,
Melissa, you start your draft there with Christian McCaffrey. Good luck to you the rest of the way. We'll check in with you in a little bit. So like we said, folks, this is how these drafts can go. You're talking to some of the very best in the industry, and everything went haywire right away with Justin Jefferson going number 1. Melissa picking at number 4. Remember, these are people who do this all the time, saying that was a pick at number 4 I didn't even have in my headspace. She's able to take him at number 4. Let's move on to the 5th team. That's Josh Hayes. He's got the New York Bodega Cats, and he's going to end up with Cooper Kupp. Josh, you get the 2nd wide receiver off the board. Is this who you expected, and how do you feel about landing Kupp here with the 1st pick for yourself of this team?
We're super excited for sure. We didn't plan to have Cooper Kupp make it to us. We've seen him going 2nd or 3rd overall in a lot of standard PPR drafts. But we were definitely set on taking a wide receiver to sort of mitigate injury risk and try to get a guy in the 1st round that can play 16, 17 games for us. And Cooper Kupp was at the top of our board.
So let me ask you about that, because I've heard a lot of that. I've talked about that for many years in different formats. Is that running back position is the most volatile. I think everybody knows that, and that's why I think the waiver wire is so important. You get late in the season, and you don't know who's going to end up winning you a championship. Are you that worried about the position that you feel like Cooper Kupp is that much safer than any of the running backs that were available?
Well, I mean, if we look at 2021 and the stats, we had, depending on your scoring, 7 to 8 wide receivers out of the top 12 were the top fantasy scores last season, so it feels like it's pretty safe. We know they take less of a pounding. They don't have to run between the tackles, take all the goal line work that a lot of running backs have. And we've seen guys like Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, even Saquon Barkley let us down in the past. So we'd rather just take the middle rounds to attack the running back position rather than gamble for the home run hitter at running back.
Josh giving away a little strategy there. Josh, thanks. We'll check in with you coming up in a little bit. Let's move to the 6th pick. She's here with us, Stephanie Smalls. And at the 6th pick, she's going to take Najee Harris to finish up the first half of the 1st round. Of course, GM of the Chicago Hog Mollies. Steph, Najee Harris here, I guess the big question everybody has for the Pittsburgh Steelers is it's a new quarterback. It's Mitch Trubisky there in Pittsburgh. You take him, obviously, the first player on your team, a cornerstone player. Do you have any concerns with a new quarterback in Pittsburgh?
I don't, and I went with Najee here because I think that's probably the safest bet on this team if you're going to take a Steeler. I know that Najee finishes RB3, and I think he will be just as consistent. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. I thought I was going to get Dalvin Cook actually there, things changed, and that's okay. So I'm very happy to start with Najee.
Najee Harris will start for the Chicago Mollies, and Steph will check in with you in just a little bit. That brings us to number 7, one of our expansion teams, Lindsey Rhodes and the Green Bay Winter Warriors, and she's going to open up with Austin Eckler. Now, Lindsey, I think Austin Eckler last year was somebody that people had to be talked into, even though he was so great. He was great again. Do you just love the consistency of Austin Eckler to start your team off?
Yeah, I like his versatility. I like his consistency. I like the offense. And that's something that I'm taking into consideration here. I think this is a team that's going to put up tons of points week in and week out. And I think he'll be operating with a positive script, which I think the same cannot be said for some of these other running backs. I can't believe that I can kind of believe that Austin Eckler was there. I can't believe that I had the choices between him and Derrick Henry at that point in the draft. I've yet to be in a draft where a wide receiver has gone first overall. And I think that the way that affected the beginning of the first round is certainly notable. I'm on the clock again for the second round.
Lindsey, we'll let you go with that. I don't want to distract you there. We'll come back and talk about your team coming up in a little bit because we are moving along here in this draft. Lindsey's going to be on the clock in the second round here. Let's move on to the defending champions because they are here with us, and they are going to land Jamar Chase, second-year wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Went to the Super Bowl last year. Chase was absolutely outstanding. Joe, Jamar Chase here is going to be the third wide receiver off the board. Take us inside your head why this selection was made.
Matt, well, remember what I told you before the draft when we were on Instagram Live that, don't prepare for anything. We came in very unprepared, but I did think, that's a good spot for Dalvin Cook, and I really like Dalvin Cook this year. Strategy totally blown up right away. You start 3 wide receivers. It's full point PPR. Jamar Chase is an anchor in that format. The thing about Chase that's interesting, though, is he might catch fewer passes than a guy like Justin Jefferson or Cooper Kupp, who obviously were the first 2 wide receivers taken. But the big play upside, the touchdown upside, far too much for us to pass up on in that spot. As a matter of fact, Graham and I, it was a no-brainer pick given how the board had fallen to that point.
All right, we'll check in back with the champs coming up in a little bit as we're moving here through the first round talking about the picks. But as you can see by the draft board, we're almost done with the second round. That tells me that everybody's on the ball, including the defending champions getting Jamar Chase. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Powder Kegs and Jeff Radcliffe because with the 9th pick, Jeff, you're going to land Derrick Henry. Now, we heard a little bit earlier, some people had actually thought about taking Derrick Henry here. Derrick Henry's in a much different situation, Jeff, than he was last year. Do you have the same kind of confidence in him, knowing that the Titans don't have the same firepower as they did in 2021?
I mean, all they really lost was A.J. Brown. He's still the team. This is a guy who, in PPR, doesn't have to catch a single football the entire season, and he can still be the number 1 running back. If he gets 29.5 carries a game, obviously I'm going to have a little bit of concern with injury. But that kind of workload, it's a rarity in today's league. He's an absolute monster. And I had him at 6 on my board, so getting him at 9, #value, right?
There you go. Jeff's going to start things off with Derrick Henry. And like he said, amazingly, value can actually happen in the first round. Jeff's not the only one to bring that up. We'll check in with Jeff in a little bit here as we continue on talking to each of the GMs about their first round pick. But as you can see by the board, we're already almost halfway through the third round. That brings us to pick number 10, Marcus Grant of the Los Angeles Sidekicks, and he's going to end up with Davante Adams. Now, Marcus, this is an interesting one to me because this is, as I believe, the first player who was on a different team than they played on last year. He's going from Aaron Rodgers now to Derek Carr in Las Vegas. Have you changed your opinion at all on Davante Adams after last year?
Really haven't. I mean, look, if you're going to leave Aaron Rodgers, why wouldn't you leave him for your best football friends with whom you ripped things up in college? I mean, these two guys were dynamic together at Fresno State. And I don't really care what uniform he's wearing or where he's collecting his mail. Davante Adams is still arguably the best receiver in the league. He's going to be a target monster. Maybe he's not quite on the level he was in Green Bay, but I still think it's in the range of outcomes that you see him as a top 3 wide receiver at the end of the season. So I'm very comfortable having him be my first pick.
We'll check in with Marcus in a little bit. Like as I said, this is the first, and this will come up a couple times here. This is the first player who is changing teams, a high-end player. There's a couple more, certainly more than a couple more out there that you will see get drafted in the HOFL draft here as we are in season number 2. But Devontae Adams is a first-round pick here. Marcus is going to take him 10th overall, no longer in Green Bay, now in Las Vegas with Derek Carr as his quarterback. I agree with Marcus, though. Having that rapport going back to college days is important for a player changing teams. Let's talk about the Vegas Pocket Kings, talking about Vegas, and that's going to be Jeff Mans here. He's going to end up with Joe Mixon in the first round, running back, of course, of the AFC defending champion Cincinnati Bengals. Now, Jeff, we did see, of course, Jamar Chase go earlier, Joe Mixon's teammate. Mixon's one of the veterans, which is kind of weird to say now. I feel old calling Joe Mixon a veteran. Jeff, how important is it to you to have Joe Mixon on a team that has to be considered, once again, one of the favorites in the AFC? Jeff might be muted, unfortunately. We'll see if we can get him up. That's a party foul. We're not going to knock him too much for that. Jeff, you there now? I think we have him.
Yeah,
All right,
I got you. There we go. And first of all, shout out to Matt Camp for the HOFL references. I think we went a whole year last year that one HOFL. This is absolutely, I'm like, this is brilliant. So job well done there. Listen, Mixon's only 26. He was running back 4 in fantasy football last year, and he got 3/5 of his offensive line improved. The Bengals offense came of age in the second half of last year, obviously with the Super Bowl run. So they slowed the pace down when they play with the lead as well. When you're talking Ted Karras, Alex Kappa, and Lael Collins, it's a heavy-duty right side. I think they can lean on this running game when they get a lead, and I think Mixon's going to be in for a great year.
Jeff, I want to follow up with that because I have seen the odds, and they've changed a little bit. Are you surprised the Bengals are not getting more love after what they did last year and the aforementioned improvements on the offensive line?
A little bit, but at the same time, it's such a tough conference.
Right.
AFC, if they were in the NFC, they'd be overwhelming favorites. But the AFC, between what the AFC West has done and the AFC North, with a healthy Lamar Jackson there, the Steelers are always competitive. The Browns getting Deshaun Watson, we'll see how that goes. I mean, that division's tough, so I'm not as surprised because whichever team makes it out of the AFC is going to be battle-tested.
Jeff, we'll check in with you in a little bit here as we're almost at the end of the third round. And before we talk to our next GM, I know he's got a couple of picks coming up because, of course, here in the snake draft, when you pick at the end, you're going to come right back around in the second round, and we'll talk to Scott Engel in just a little bit about that because he's got a pick coming up here in a few minutes. I just want to remind everyone here as we come towards the end of the third round, there's plenty of ways for you to get involved. First of all, download the HOFL app. As we talked about earlier when we started things here at the draft, there are 2 different contests that you can get involved with, $75,000 going week to week, and of course on top of that, you can get in the DFS contest, and there's plenty of money to be won there. First place $750, second place $500, and third place $250 on a weekly basis. So get that HOFL app. It will get you involved, and you want to be involved because why wouldn't you want to be getting involved with some of the very best in the fantasy football industry? And once again, with all of these teams, you can find who you want to support, and there's 10% off right now of merchandise. You want to go to thehofl.com, and when you're in checkout, use the promo code SEASON2. That's SEASON2 with the number. Get 10% off. Find who you want to support. Are you going to be a front runner, a bandwagon jumper, and jump on the Atlanta Hot Wings? Maybe you'll join one of our new expansion franchises because Season 1 was 10 teams. Season 2 is now up to 12 teams. We are now through 3 rounds here, believe it or not. We're moving along very quickly. We have not spoken to a man who, if you talk to the New York Bodega Cats, is an absolute traitor from going from New York out to Seattle and the Seattle Haze. And we're going to talk to Scott Engel right now. As I said, he was the GM last year in Season 1 of the New York franchise. He goes across the country. You know he's a Seahawks fan, and now is the GM of the Seattle Haze. So, Scott, let's talk about where you're at so far because we got 4 picks. Let's get into all of it. You open up with Swift, Kamara, Waddle, and Allen Robinson. Scott, you're going to go running back on the turn. How much of that was strategy and how much is that reacting to the board?
It's mostly reaction, Matt, because, a lot of people will ask fantasy analysts, I'm sitting at this pick. Who should I go for? And I think, these are the guys going to be picked ahead of me. Don't guess. You go with the flow. What I do is, and I do it every round, is I just queued up my top 12 guys. And when it was my turn, I just picked the top 2, and that's what happened. I got 2 great, versatile PPR backs, and then came around to the third and fourth. People will ask, should I go running back, wide receiver? It's not by design. I want to fill out running back and wide receiver heavily in the early rounds, but I'm not going by design necessarily. And it's fine to pick from 12 because you get to be the first guy to pick a second player. That's fine, and I ain't mad at the Bodega Cats. I wish them luck, but we're bringing a championship back to Seattle this year.
Scott, I want to follow up on that. That turn is very interesting because when you're picking at the end of a round, you're going to come right back around and pick again. If you're picking first overall like Dr. Roto does, he's got to wait 23 picks to make his second selection. In your head, you're getting 2 of the top 13 players. Does that affect your strategy? I know you said you're playing to the board, but because you have those back-to-back picks, not only here, but as you just did in rounds 3 and 4, you go back with Waddle and Robinson as 2 wide receivers. How much does the turn, do you think, help you in a draft like this?
I think it helps, just like I said, because you're at the end of one round, but you're at the beginning of another. So you get the last of one lot, but you get the first of another lot. But I was talking with the HOFL staff about this before the draft. A good, experienced fantasy player like we have here, you can draft from any slot. If you find out you're picking 11 or 12, don't groan. If you're ready, you can draft from anywhere.
And you have to be in these kind of drafts. One more question here, Scott. Allen Robinson, another big-name wide receiver, changing teams. Now, some might think, and I'm kind of in this bucket, that Adams going from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr is a downgrade. I think that's obvious. Obviously, as Marcus talked about, there is that camaraderie, there is that rapport there from their college days. To me, though, Allen Robinson, no offense, Bears fans, has escaped the Chicago Bears and has now made it to the world champion Los Angeles Rams. Is Allen Robinson almost a value there in the 4th round?
Yeah, I have him inside my top 20 wide receivers. This is a guy who played with some quarterbacks who were not too good. Just did a lot on his own to go and get the ball, gain yardage after the catch. He creates a lot of his own opportunities. We saw him at a terrific season with Jacksonville earlier in his career, and now he goes to get to play with the best quarterback of his career. So that as a number 2 fantasy wide receiver, I really like Robinson. We just have to hope that Stafford's elbow is fine. But when you're playing against people like this, these type of experts, you've got to be willing to take the risks.
No doubt about it. Scott, we'll check in with you in a little bit. We appreciate your thoughts there on your team through 4 rounds. And as you can see here, we're almost halfway through the 5th round. And something Scott noted that I want to bring up is, these injuries will pop up. And sometimes it's an injury that is a carryover from last year. And you're wondering, as was brought up earlier, sometimes you just don't want to see anybody on the field. Joe Dole and I have done plenty of shows where we talked about the fact that when you get to this point in the preseason, if a player is great, like a Christian McCaffrey, for instance, you don't want to see him at all. You don't care that they get on the field, or you don't want them on the field at all almost in the preseason, because they don't need those reps. They don't need those hits. They don't want to fill up that hit card until we get into week number 1. Matthew Stafford, though, this elbow injury has now popped up a little bit later on. This is not something we talked a lot about in May and June and even into July. In the last couple weeks, I do think it's something that many of our GMs and those of you playing at home will be thinking about, and it's something we have to monitor as we do throughout the preseason. I want to bring it back to Matt Harmon. He picked number 2 of the Ohio Goats. He is 5 rounds into this draft. He started things off with Jonathan Taylor, comes back around with Mike Evans, and he's going to take one of the first tight ends off the board in Mark Andrews, of course, of the Baltimore Ravens, coming back with Juju and then St. Brown. So that's his first 5 picks here. 3 wide receivers, 1 running back, and a tight end in Mark Andrews. So, Matt, let's talk about this team here for a second, because there's 2 strategies I want to ask you about. First of all, you take Jonathan Taylor. Some have taken him number 1 overall. His ADP does, in most formats, have him as the first overall pick. You have not touched the running back position since then. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Yeah, look, the reality is just there was a more appealing wide receiver at every single portion of the draft there than there was a running back. So for me, I definitely want to start 3 wide receivers in this league. You know, with the point per reception, it's a big position as well. So honestly, I just really like these 2 guys that I picked as well, Juju and St. Brown there. You know, sort of similar archetypes of players, the big slot guys, and I think they'll rack up a lot of catches. St. Brown to me still feels, you know, like a great pick in the 5th round here. You know, a guy that I've been calling Bud Light Cooper Kupp, and I feel really good about this year. So I think we're real happy to get him in the 5th round.
So would you say that's more about the best player available situation, not necessarily avoiding the running back position?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a conscious choice to avoid the running back position if there was a guy that I really liked. I did debate a little bit before picking Juju in the 4th round, you know, some of those running backs that were there along with him. But I'm feeling pretty good about what's going to come back in the 6th round and sort of the gap between those guys from a tier perspective.
And I want to come back to Mark Andrews. He's the 2nd tight end off the board. We saw Travis Kelce go in the middle of the 2nd round. And, you know, the tight end position has been such a fascinating one to analyze and react to. There have been years where we go, oh, there's 5 great ones, and then good luck. There's been years we come in and we think it's maybe 13 or 14 deep. Is that a position that you felt you needed to kind of lock in on, or is this about Mark Andrews just being the most important part of the Baltimore Ravens offense?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, right? I mean, Mark Andrews himself is a great player, and I think I'm a big Rashad Bateman fan, but I definitely think that Mark Andrews is the most secure guy in that passing game. So he's got a great ceiling this year, just a really good player, and I like Lamar Jackson coming back and taking another step as a passer. But yeah, part of it, Matt, is like I don't want to deal with the tight end position later on. You know, these guys after probably about tight end 9 or so, I don't want to find myself in that mess. And this is really the first time among all the drafts I've done recently that I've gotten the early tight end, and it feels like I'm going to enjoy really picking from the potential breakout wide receivers that are going to go in the range where I'd have to look at a tight end if I didn't.
Matt, you're coming up here in the 6th round, so we'll let you get to that. Thank you. We'll check in with you a little bit later on. Now, here's what I've noticed here as you've been watching the board along with all of us. We get into the 5th round, and you see that red-pink color. That means we have our first quarterback off the board. It is Patrick Mahomes here. And then we come back around, you're going to see Josh Allen come off the board. You're going to see Justin Herbert also come off the board. So we go 5 rounds. We finally see our first quarterback. If you've been listening or reading your favorite analyst, this has been something that's been going on for years. How far do you want to wait for a quarterback? If you're playing in your home league with your friends, sometimes you go off the board early. And it's also about format. We talked to the Atlanta Hot Wings in the Instagram Live before we started. Last year, this was a 10-team league. There was a super flex spot, meaning you can start a quarterback in your flex position. That means you could start 2 quarterbacks. We know that a lot of points are going to come from the quarterback position. Even the average and below average quarterbacks can put up a lot of points just by the nature of the position and the scoring system. However, with this now being a 12-team league and only 1 quarterback, you see, we wait to the 5th round before we see the first quarterback off the board. Now, I want to bring in Jeff Mans here again because he was the one who took Patrick Mahomes. He is 6 picks deep. He's going to take Patrick Mahomes at the end of the 5th round here, 11th pick of the 5th round. So, Jeff, we just talked about you having Joe Mixon, Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Connor, Patrick Mahomes, Lazard, and I want to get to that in a second. Why do you feel this was the time to take the first quarterback in Patrick Mahomes?
Being on the edge like this, you know, you have to move it or you can get usurped throughout the rest. And we're kind of seeing that with Hurts, Jackson, Murray all the way out. It was tough between Allen and Mahomes. They're neck and neck. I just think the addition, new offense coordinator in Buffalo, Allen's starting to get a little bit older. They can't depend on him for 35% of their running game. You saw them go out, try to get McKissick. They draft James Cook. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit more in Buffalo, whereas Kansas City, that division, Matt, yeah. I want to be part of it. I want to be every one of those games. I've projected 54.5 or higher total for every interdivisional game, back and forth. I like that. So Mahomes was the choice. I think Kansas City's defense took a little bit of a hit this offseason. So, I don't think there's going to be any real detriment to Tyreek Hill leaving. And I think Mahomes is going to, the more of the weight's going to be on his shoulders, so he was the choice.
And I want to get to your pick that came after that. You took Allen Lazard. He's your 3rd wide receiver. I think a lot of people are expecting big things from Lazard in Green Bay now that Devontae Adams is in Vegas. He is your 3rd wide receiver. To me, Jeff, that looks like a 3rd wide receiver that could obviously be the potential of a wide receiver too. How much are you in love with this pick, if at all?
Very much. I mean, we don't even want to talk about him. We call him Mike Honcho, just because we don't like Lazard. It's one of the quietest sleepers in fantasy football. You have 230 missed targets in Green Bay this year. Somebody's catching the ball, and Romeo Doubs getting some love right now. But I mean, Lazard's 6'4". He runs a 4.5 40. He's leaping ability, been in the offense for 4 years. He has got every single part of the pedigree. He was a highly recruited guy, but stayed home in Iowa State. If he was coming out this year, he'd be touted to the absolute hilt. But because he's been in the system longer, he's kind of not, which is beautiful for our draft value. So locking him in the 6, he's going to be the number 1 from Aaron Rodgers, and I'm not even 1% concerned that he may not be.
Great spot for you there, Jeff. I love the pick a lot. We'll come back and check in on with you in a little bit because you're going to come up here with your 7th round pick. And a couple of things that Jeff noted there. You heard him talking about those targets that are available, and that is something that a lot of the GMs are going to focus on. It's not always about talent. Lazard's a very talented player. But when you look at a team like the Green Bay Packers, who are obviously a favorite in the NFC, who are playing with the reigning MVP in Aaron Rodgers, 230 targets are available for a team that needs to fill in those targets. Somebody's got to do that. Now, sometimes targets are available on mediocre teams or below average teams, and they're still worth getting a piece of because someone's got to get those targets, someone's got to catch those balls. We're talking about Allen Lazard on the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers and 200-plus targets available to fill in. Will they all be there? Of course not. But he's going to get a lot of them. It's a good spot to be in. Something else he mentioned here before we talk to another one of our GMs I want to note. He talked about Patrick Mahomes and being in the AFC West. And he noted the fact that it's a very competitive, maybe the most and deepest division in all of the NFL. But he mentioned that the Chiefs are not as good on defense. What does that mean? Well, the offense may have to carry things a little bit more. I think back to the years when Matthew Stafford was in Detroit. They didn't have a great defense. They'd be playing from behind in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden he's at 180 yards. By the end of the game, he's at 330, and maybe it's 3 picks, but there might be 4 touchdowns in there. It doesn't matter what it looks like at the end of the day as long as you get there. It might be ugly, but sometimes getting players from those good offenses on teams that don't have bad defenses, there's more opportunity there. Could be the case for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. He's the first quarterback off the board. And I'm going to wait here a little bit as we look here at the quarterback position, just a little review of the board. After Mahomes goes, we see a little bit of a run in that next round with Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. Now more quarterbacks are coming off the board. And if I'm looking here correctly, 1, 2, 3, only 4 teams now do not have a quarterback. So do they wait? We're going to talk to some more of those GMs who have yet to take a quarterback, but I want to go back to the defending champions, the Atlanta Hot Wings, Joe Dolan and Graham Barfield, because they are now 8 rounds deep. We are moving that quickly, and they have taken their first quarterback in Justin Herbert. Joe, strategy here a little bit. We talked about Jamar Chase. You took Travis Kelce. For those at home who are watching, they may go, you took a tight end so early. To me, and I think you'll agree, you kind of got to wipe away the fact that it says TE next to his name because of the team he plays on, the role he has for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I mean, I think 100 catches is probably in the cards for Travis Kelce. Heck, even if he loses a step, you would think 100 catches is in the cards given all the targets that are vacated in Kansas City. So we leaned into a strategy, Matt, that ended up just getting us a ton of pass catchers. And I think this room was, quite frankly, a little drunk on running backs. And we were like, okay, we'll lean into getting pass catchers. You could start 4. You have to start 3 wide receivers. You can start 4.
Right.
We've got 5 that I think stack up and probably are going to give us one of the strongest groups in the room. And now we're going to have to adjust our strategies in the second half. But, I mean, we took 6 primary pass catchers with our first 6 picks. Maybe not Brandon Ayuk, but still, that is I think it's a strategy that really is going to end up paying off in some ways, but we have to, like we did last year, we won this league because we worked the waiver wire.
Right.
That's what's going to have to happen.
Well, I want to ask you about that because someone's going to look at this board right now and see your team and see blue and orange and wide receivers and a tight end and a quarterback, and you don't take your first running back until Kareem Hunt here in the round we're in right now, the 8th round. Tell everybody why you waited that long. You talked about the receivers. People would freak out if they saw the fact that they don't have a running back on their board until round 8. That's what you guys did with Kareem Hunt.
Let's look at the facts here. Travis Etienne, who was a player we liked, and we were talking about him, is a guy who missed his entire rookie season with a foot injury, is in a split backfield, presuming James Robinson can be healthy, on a bad team behind a bad offensive line. He was the first pick of the 3rd round. Then you got guys like Cam Akers coming off a torn Achilles. He's going in the 3rd round. Ezekiel Elliott, who half the world thinks is a corpse, is going in the 3rd round. And so we decided that based on what the teams in the room were building, we were going to have to zag a little bit. Yes, I understand. If you're going to post this draft board and you're going to post this team on social media, we're going to get killed for it. Because that's always the case when you're forced into this strategy. And I'm not even a zero RB guy necessarily. We were forced into that strategy. I thought our first round pick was a no-brainer. I thought our second round pick was a no-brainer based on how the board fell. And then we had to kind of adjust after that. But, I mean, I think we're going to get roasted for our running backs. But we find one, I'll go to battle with this team. We find one, go to battle.
So there you go. There's a good insight there from Joe and the defending champions, by the way, the Atlanta Hot Wings. Looking at that team, as Joe said, you post that on social media and go, what's my team look like? It will get beat up. But the running back position is the most volatile in fantasy football, and the waiver wire is more important than ever. I guarantee you right now, there is a running back that will not get drafted today that will help someone win in the playoffs and potentially win a fantasy championship. It might be a rookie or a second-year player or a player who's been in the league for 5 years and just happens to be starting that week because there's injuries or a team has clinched that late in the season. It happens every single year. Opportunity is going to matter in a very big way when we get to the fantasy playoffs. It's not always about the best players. It is about the best opportunity. Joe is showing you there that their team, they know they're going to hit the waiver wire. Their first running back is not going to be until the 8th round with Kareem Hunt. Now, we are unbelievably about 8 rounds done here as we're completing the 8th round, almost halfway through. I'm going to let Dr. Roto make his pick here on the turn to start the 9th round, and then I want to bring in Dr. Roto. First pick overall, the Boston Barflies. So let's talk to Dr. Roto right now. I'm going to put your feet to the fire. Dr. Roto, we just heard Joe talk about Travis Etienne and the fact that he has had, obviously, some injury issues. He is your second running back on this team. How do you feel about his situation, knowing the history or lack thereof he's had in the NFL so far?
Yeah, I feel great. I mean, I knew going into this draft that I was taking ETN with the first pick of round 3. Draft couldn't have gone any better. I think there's 2 O's in Roto when you write me the check for this one. I just love how it looks. I don't mind not taking a quarterback till later. I love building the wide receivers and the running backs, getting the PPR points. Look, I think sometimes you've got to make a pick seeing the future. I just see ETN being a top 15, even better, top 10 type of running back. It's going to have a lot of opportunities. James Robinson's not fully ready to go yet. And you're talking about a team that's going to be playing from behind all season long. So I'm a big fan.
I want to talk about the quarterback position. You don't have one yet. And we have seen just about every team, except for you're one of the 4 teams right now that doesn't have a quarterback. How much is that about waiting, and how much is about the fact that all of these other teams have already taken a quarterback?
Well, look, I can't ever tell another team what to do, but hopefully somebody else is not worrying about their backup quarterback. They should be building their rosters the way they think best. I feel like in a 4-point per touchdown league, you can use a lot of quarterbacks to win. You don't have to have a top 5 guy. So give me a guy at 10, give me a guy at 12. It'll be as good as anybody else.
So do you think the quarterback, if we call them QB1s, let's put them in that tier, how deep do you think that tier goes?
15 or 16 guys. I mean, look, nobody likes Aaron Rodgers this year, but is Aaron Rodgers going to throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns? Sure. If he's my number 1 quarterback, that's fine. Do I love him? No, but I think if I can get those kind of stats from my quarterback 1, I think I can win.
We appreciate you joining us. We'll check in with you once again before the end of the draft, still without a quarterback. And I want to bring in another team that doesn't have a quarterback, also picking early in the first round, Matt Harmon of the Ohio Goats. Matt, let's talk to you about this again. We've checked in with your team a little bit, but I just want to get your thoughts quickly on not going quarterback here. How much does the rest of the board play into that based on the quarterbacks we've seen get drafted so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Roto nailed the analysis there. I mean, I'm not concerned that somebody's going to take a backup quarterback before me, before taking my first one. So I'll get around to it. I debated it definitely in that 9th round, and I know I'm a sucker. Tyler Lockett falling to round 9. I just can't help myself. I know it's an unserious quarterback situation. Geno Lock, Drew Smith in the year 2022. But I mean, the target volume that's going to be there, the talent of the player, I can't pass him up there in the 9th round.
Thank you, Matt. We'll check with you a little bit. I'll move on to the team who had the 3rd pick. And right now it's Lawrence Jackson of the New Jersey Boardwalkers. He is here with us today. Lawrence, I want to focus in on your quarterback, Jalen Hurts. And this is the type of quarterback who, as we saw last last year, maybe not considered one of the best in the NFL, but one of the best in fantasy when he was on the field and feeling good. That feels like the secret is far from hidden anymore. I think everybody knows that Jalen Hurts is a very valuable fantasy quarterback. What are you hoping to see from him this season with the Eagles?
Getting A.J. Brown now, it's only going to help him. He's not getting A.J. Brown not going to make him worse. Now, I definitely just got sniped for Lamar Jackson, and I felt physical pain in my bones. So, but you can't get flustered. You always have to have a backup plan, and that is definitely Jalen Hurts, and I got extreme confidence in him going into 2022.
All right, so let me ask you about that, because you said you wanted to take Lamar Jackson. Was that because you wanted to take a quarterback in this round? Were you that set on getting the position handled here?
So I saw how it was going, and I saw that it wasn't happening in the 5th round. So I was like, okay, cool. Probably in the 6th. But then when I saw Mahomes go late in the 5th, I said, all right, there's going to be some quarterbacks taken in the 6th round. Then I saw Kyler go, Lamar go, and there was no way Jalen Hurts, I don't think that he would have got back to me. And if he did, I wasn't going to take that risk.
One more I want to ask you about is you take Kyle Pitts here, and a 3rd round selection, 3rd tight end off the board. And we saw what he did last year. But the quarterback situation has changed. How much does that concern you, even though he's a very talented player?
Yeah, not too much, especially as long as, Mariota at quarterback. He got history with Delaney Walker making him an elite fantasy tight end. So, you put that with the fact that Kyle Pitts is like the greatest athlete ever created. And so, we ready to go. And if I wanted to get Pitts because I knew there was absolutely no shot I could get him, and I didn't want to punt the position in this draft, so I feel like I got my guy.
All right, Lawrence, we'll check with you a little bit. We appreciate the insight there. Kyle Pitts, we just talked about 3rd round selection. He took Jalen Hurts. A lot of buzz around the Eagles this year, and what feels like a pretty open NFC East. And as Lawrence said, they now have A.J. Brown there. This is another season under Nick Sirianni. This is another season for Jalen Hurts. And as obvious it may be, the Eagles are going to go as their quarterback goes, but how far they go will fall on Jalen Hurts. Sometimes, though, you can throw that all out the window because he can run. And when I have said this many times, I know a lot of people, Lawrence will agree, look for legs. He wanted Lamar Jackson, ended up with Jalen Hurts. There's plenty of quarterbacks who can make up a difference in talent just based on the fact that they can get you points with their legs. Jalen Hurts certainly has proven to be one of those players. And sometimes there is that difference between fantasy and reality. The Eagles hope that Jalen Hurts can make that jump in both fantasy and reality if they want to be contenders in the NFC. Jalen Hurts certainly a big-time fantasy quarterback as we saw last year, and Lawrence and the New Jersey Boardwalkers will hope for more of the same in 2022. Remember, to get involved here, you got to get the app, the HOFL app, the HOFL app. Go search for it wherever you get your apps. You want to be part of this. You want to get in the contest, whether it be the season long, the week to week, where you can win up to $75,000, or, of course, our DFS contest, where you can win $750, $500, and $250, 1st through 3rd on a weekly basis. You want to get that, download the HOFL app right now. Get a part of these teams. And another way you can get part of these teams is get their merchandise. Plenty of cool-looking logos out there, something that doesn't typically happen in fantasy football leagues. Not only can you support your team, you can do so with some great merchandise. You want to go to thehofl.com, and you want to use the promo code SEASON2, because right now, for a limited time, you can get 10% off using Season 2 in the checkout. HOFL.com. Get a piece of merchandise from your favorite team. As you see it all right there, some great looks. We got some new expansion teams. See the Denver Mile Highs right there. Promo code Season 2 in the checkout. Get 10% off and support one of your favorite HOFL teams along with their GMs. Make sure you follow all the franchises as well. You'll be getting insights throughout the year, not only on the app, but from the GMs as well. We're going to do more of that right now because I would like to go back out to Marcus Grant. He is the GM of the Los Angeles Sidekicks, and we're about halfway through his draft. Started with Devontae Adams, came back with Aaron Jones, and as you look here throughout the draft, I want to talk a little bit about David Montgomery, Marcus, because 2 years ago, a lot of people thought, okay, this is his time. He's going to be the breakout player. A lot of comparisons are closely ranked to someone like Miles Sanders. It didn't happen. Not on a great team last year. I don't think a lot of people are excited about the Chicago Bears this year. but how much does it mean to David Montgomery that he might be the marquee player for the Chicago Bears?
I mean, I think it means a lot. It means a lot to me. This is why I took him in the 4th round. I feel like he's that guy that is sort of perpetually underrated. That he ends up falling to the 4th round in a lot of drafts, and then he ends up giving you solid RB2 numbers. So I was at a spot in the draft where I looked around, and I wasn't completely enamored with a lot of the wide receiver options around me, and I also knew that he's a guy that I really like, and after him, the running backs to me sort of fell off a little bit. So it felt good at that spot to go out and get him. I could come back and maybe hammer some pass catchers if I needed to a little bit later on in the draft. But I do think there's going to be a big workload on it. The Bears didn't really seem to do a lot to help Justin Fields this offseason, right. And I think for them to be successful, they're really going to have to lean on David Montgomery.
Before you're getting to your pick, it's coming up in a couple spots. It's almost weird to me, and I know you have to adjust on year to year, to see Adam Thielen going this late in a fantasy draft where there's been years where he's blown everybody out of the water. I know maybe people aren't enamored with what the quarterback situation looks like in Minnesota, and you got a new coach there. He is your wide receiver 3. Is that value almost too good to pass up there? What are your expectations for Thielen this season?
I think it was a good value at that spot, right? I mean, this is still a fairly, concentrated passing game between Jefferson and Thielen. And I think we'll see Irv Smith sort of work in there a little bit this year. But Kirk Cousins generally has eyes for 2 guys. And, the thing about Thielen, for years we have been projecting and predicting this touchdown regression, and he has sort of laughed in our face about that. So, I don't know if this means he's going to score double-digit touchdowns again this year, but I do know that he's a guy that Kirk Cousins likes to look for around the end zone. So I'm hoping if he can sort of keep that number, semi-afloat, I like him as my 3rd receiver.
And you did just take a quarterback here in the last round. You took Trey Lance. Is this just I need one? Is this maybe a situation where you could find yourself streaming your quarterbacks?
Possibly. Look, we kept talking about the quarterbacks who run, right? Lawrence being sick to his stomach about not getting Lamar Jackson. But Trey Lance sort of falls in that category, right? I mean, he's very raw. You read the camp reports, and it's sort of up and down about Trey Lance, but one thing he can do is get out of the pocket. And I sort of feel like Trey Lance this year can be what Jalen Hurts was last year. So I will say this. I ended up with a little more exposure to the Niners offense than I had sort of planned, and that was kind of sort of how the board shook out by getting George Kittle and Elijah Mitchell. But if Trey Lance can be the guy that we think he is, I feel like he's a pretty solid starter. But yeah, I mean, it may not hurt. I don't know if I'm tipping my hand here, but it may be a situation where if the board shakes out right, I may look at a second quarterback option later in this draft.
You're coming up here in a couple picks, so we'll let you go. Thank you, Marcus. And here's something I have learned throughout the years of being in this industry. Kyle Shanahan, won't say it, but he does often help us out in the fantasy football world. You basically put any running back on the field for the Niners under Kyle Shanahan, good things are going to happen. We see Marcus have a lot of pieces. He's got a lot in his wallet related to Kyle Shanahan and the San Francisco 49ers. Trey Lance is going to be his quarterback here, and you can wait, and we'll see what Marcus does. It's something we'll check in with him on later to see if he takes that second quarterback. You're going to probably see in this draft the teams, and this is from me, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. I don't think that those GMs will be taking a second quarterback. I could be wrong about that, but they're not worried about that right now. Barring an injury, they're only going to replace those quarterbacks on their bye week, and they're not going to think about it, and it's maybe not a position that's worth grabbing. In your leagues where you're starting 2 quarterbacks, where you have that super flex, sure, you're going to take 2 and probably 3 quarterbacks because that roster spot and that starting lineup positions matters that much more. When you're only starting 1 quarterback and you get one in the best, and you invest in a 5th or a 6th round pick, as we saw a lot of quarterbacks go, the high-end ones, you're not going to really worry about that position. But I could be wrong. I might eat my words later on. We'll see what those teams that took those big-name quarterbacks decide to do later on in this draft. As we just talked to Marcus there, and let's talk to Lindsey Rhodes and the Green Bay Winter Warriors, one of our expansion teams. Talking a lot about the quarterback position. Lindsey, you took Joe Burrow. He doesn't have a typical injury, but I guess he's coming off of something. I know there's excitement because he had a helmet in his hand, I think, earlier today. Is there any concern with Joe Burrow for you? It's an injury that we don't usually analyze.
I'm not particularly worried about Joe Burrow in terms of the long term of this season. I might need to back him up at some point to make sure I have somebody out of the gate just in case it lingers in some way, but I'm not an appendectomy, like he'll be fine. So, and I really like that offense, and I think that they're going to put up a ton of points this year, and I know that people are expecting some sort of regression, But I really like that offense to put up a lot of points. And so he was a guy at that point. Now that 6 quarterbacks came off the board, we waited a long time to get them going. But once they came off, they came up quick there in that 6th round. So I figured I should grab one that I really wanted there in the 7th, just in case I didn't get the opportunity by the time it came back around to me in the 8th. This has been a very interesting draft for me. I took Ezekiel Elliott with my 3rd pick, and that took me completely out of my comfortable build. And so going 3 running backs is not typically how I build. So I do feel like I've been chasing wide receivers a little bit and kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit more. Like I have a traditional build that I like to follow. And this draft and the way that it's kind of the board has fallen, I feel like the value has looked different to me than most of the drafts that I've been in. And it's been interesting in that sense.
Lindsay, you're coming up in other picks, so we'll let you go. We'll check in with you in a little bit. And folks, that tells you something right there. Some of the very best minds in the industry are in this draft. And Lindsay said, I took Eckler and Nick Chubb and Ezekiel Elliott with my first 3 picks. She doesn't feel comfortable. I have had that situation happen to me. I'm sure plenty of our GMs feel that way. They make a pick, and then they went, oh, is there regret there? Do I now have to chase another position? Sometimes that can happen. Sometimes that's about being fluid and playing to the board. We talked about it earlier in the first round, Justin Jefferson going number 1 overall. A few of the GMs were surprised in a good way of the players that ended up falling to them based on the fact that Jefferson went number 1 overall. Lindsay taking those 3 running backs has now landed her with Williams and Brown, Dalton Schultz there, but she does have Joe Burrow. And once again, you're getting a piece of a team I like a lot in the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't know if they're getting that love. The appendectomy is not something we typically analyze like a bad ankle or a shoulder or anything like that, but certainly sounds good for Burrow. You got to wonder if she will grab another quarterback a little bit later on. I want to stay right here in this room and talk to Stephanie Smalls of the Chicago Hog Mollies, and we'll take a look at her team here. Started with Najee Harris. Now, I got to ask about Antonio Gibson. There's a lot of people freaking out about what he has done or hasn't done, as we saw earlier this weekend, and the role he may or may not have. Where do you land on him right now? Are people overreacting?
To an extent, probably he still finished as RB10, and I think that he's going to get the work no matter what. We saw what Wentz did over with the Colts. That's why JT had such a good season. I think Gibson is going to get plenty of targets and should be just fine.
So that was where you look at right now. You had Najee Harris, you got Gibson, Lamb and Brown in the middle there. You have not taken a tight end. And, we talked to Matt Harmon earlier about this. He feels it's 9 deep at the position in terms of your tight end ones. Do you feel the same? Is this now going to be a situation where you may end up streaming your tight end position?
Yeah, once the tight ends start going, I kind of had to commit to this 0 tight end form that I'm now in, and maybe in a little bit of trouble, but that's okay. If that ends up being what I need to stream week to week, I'm okay with that because I got good value everywhere else.
So as we look elsewhere on this team, you did just take Kirk Cousins, and this is one of the last teams to take a quarterback. In fact, I think you are the last team to grab a quarterback. Is this another position you stream, or is there some confidence in Kirk Cousins?
I have a lot of confidence in Kirk Cousins. I went into this draft hoping I would get him. I knew he would fall to a later round. He's one of the most consistent fantasy quarterbacks. Finished QB 11 the past 2 years. He now is going to be under Kevin O'Connell. Doesn't have defensive-minded Zimmer. I'm really excited. I think he could easily be a top 10 QB this year.
Yeah, there's no fights in the sideline. Let's hope for Kirk Cousins. Stephanie, thank you for joining us. We'll come back to you in a little bit. There you go. Viking fans, someone is targeting Kirk Cousins. Even if you as Viking fans don't love the guy, there is some difference though. Fantasy versus reality. Kirk Cousins could be the type of quarterback in reality that drives you nuts if you're a fan of the Vikings or what happened, of course, in Washington. But fantasy value is there. His number 1 receiver went number 1 in this draft. There's got to be some confidence in Kirk Cousins if Justin Jefferson is going to be the first name off this entire board here in season 2 of the HOFL draft. Make sure you go get that app right now. You want to be a piece of this league. You want to get a piece of this league, you can do so. Go to your app store, wherever you get your apps, and get the HOFL app, the HOFL app. Get it now. Get a piece of this because you could be involved in 2 different contests, DFS, or of course the season long. You want to be involved. Plenty of money to win. That's good. And that's what we want to do here. We want to keep all of you involved. You can get involved with some of the very best in the fantasy football industry. And make sure you're following all of our socials at the HOFL on all social media for updates. So I was posting a lot today from here at the Hall of Fame, at the Hall of Fame Village. And you'll get some insights and a lot more throughout the year to not only help your teams, but get to see what some of these great minds in the fantasy industry are thinking, why they put their teams together. We've talked so much about this draft, but more than ever before in fantasy football, hitting that waiver wire is going to be important. You're going to see some of these teams, and as Joe Dolan from the Atlanta Hot Wings mentioned earlier, you're going to post some of these teams, and I've seen it in the YouTube chat. What are they doing here? Or this team is great, or they're loaded up and different roster construction. Look, this can go out the window. There are going to be many things that are going to take players off the field. That running back position is volatile. You're going to have to hit the waiver wire. As I said earlier, you're going to see running backs that do not get drafted today make significant impacts at some point in the season and may win some of these GMs playoff matchups and fantasy championships. Sometimes you just need a player for 1 week, and that player may not go today. Of course, the hope of all of these GMs and teams in the HOFL is the fact that they can carry them. It won't happen, but everybody's happy today, as it always is on draft day. As we are moving very quickly along here, as I'm going to take a look, we are in the 13th round. So this is the time, for the most part, the lineups, if you look at these, are pretty much set. These GMs know what close to be their week one lineups will look like. So now it's about, what does their board look like? Are they trying to back up a position? Is this now about grabbing the best player available? Is this sleeper time, perhaps? I think that's a word that gets completely overused because everybody knows what's going on in the NFL right now. But we're going to start to see some of those diamonds in the rough. And remember, when you're in the double-digit rounds here, we're starting 10 spots. When you get to 12th, 13th, 14th round, you're going to draft some players. And they're not going to be in your starting lineup very likely for the first couple weeks, and maybe they don't work out at all because you have a big injury and you need to replace, or you have to stream a tight end, or you have to stream a quarterback. Don't feel like you have to be tied to these players. A lot of people go, that's my sleeper. Well, if your coach doesn't want to put that running back on the field because he can't pass protect, there's nothing to be sleeping about because he won't be doing anything. That is something that you can't get married to some of these players you take in the double-digit rounds. And let's talk to some more of our GMs about that right now. Let's see. Let's go to Melissa Jacobs once again, the Denver Mile Highs. She was very happy to see Christian McCaffrey fall to her. Doesn't take another running back until the 5th round, and one of the teams with 2 quarterbacks. And Melissa, I think a rare case where Aaron Rodgers is listed as a backup. He will be on your team with Lamar Jackson. Can you give us some insight as to why you've taken a second quarterback behind Lamar Jackson?
Yeah, I know it's not traditional in a non-super flex, but, Lamar Jackson has and I'm sorry, Lawrence, for swiping in from you. I'm not sorry.
Don't apologize. No apologies. No apologies.
But, last year, the season was so volatile for Jackson with the illnesses and missing so much time. So I just figured like the guy who's throwing to Alan Lazard would be, a safe bet. And there weren't other positional players that were jumping out to me at that point in the draft. And I didn't want to have to stream like the bottom of the barrel, like Mitch Trubisky for my, starting quarterback if something happens to Lamar.
You're coming up here in a second. I want to ask you, though, about Josh Jacobs. There's a lot of wonder about where the Raiders putting him out there to potentially shop him to another team. He was the 3rd running back you took. How do you feel about Josh Jacobs and his role with the Raiders?
Well, I'm just hoping with the addition of Devontae Adams that it's just a more efficient offense in general, and that will up his usage. I'm sort of kind of solely focused on that. I know there's risks. I took some, if you just look at my draft overall, there are, especially at the wide receivers position, some old stable guys like Keenan Allen and Brandon Cooks. And then he's one, Josh Jacobs, especially in the running backs that are, going to be boom or bust, basically, and hopefully boom.
Melissa, you're on the clock right now. I'll let you get back to it. I don't want to take your attention away. We appreciate your insight. We'll try to check in on with you before the end of the draft. We're in the 14th round already, so we're coming up here. 4 more rounds to go, as we said. We're kind of getting into that who do I love situation. Are you trying to back up, as we saw Melissa do with Rodgers behind Lamar Jackson? Are you trying to grab those diamonds in the rough players that you think will eventually come through? I will tell you this. This is how it should be. There's no defense or kickers off the board yet, and I don't think it will happen for another couple rounds. No defense is that good. I promise you that. No kicker is that good. But we'll see how that works out as we move forward. I want to go back to the New York Bodega Cats and talk to Josh Hayes right now. 5th pick overall, started things off as we look back, of course, with Cooper Kupp, Leonard Fournette, Cam Akers there. Cam Akers, with the Rams here, defending Super Bowl champs. He's your second running back behind Leonard Fournette. You're talking about two teams I think most people have very high hopes for. Talk to us a little bit about the strategy of taking those running backs in the first 2 rounds.
So
3 rounds.
This is where a situation where we kind of let the board dictate how quickly we were going to take running backs off the board. And since we saw an aggressive push in the first couple rounds, and coming back in that 3rd round there, kind of felt like the line was Cam Akers, and then you were diving deep into running back timeshare territory, And Cam Akers was probably in some sort of timeshare, but the Rams were pretty quick to give him that job back as soon as he was healthy in 2021, and was still the guy they trusted after 3 fumbles in the playoffs. So we're going to end this season.
After Cooper Kupp, you're going to take DK Metcalf and Jerry Jeudy. That is Russell Wilson's former number 1 wide receiver and maybe his current one in Denver. I want to start, though, with Metcalf. What's your level of expectation there, knowing that he no longer has Russell Wilson throwing him the ball in Seattle?
Yeah, this is a tough one, but we're going to bet on talent, one, and I think maybe the negative game script of having to throw 40-plus times a game. I don't think anybody expects Seattle to be winning too many games. They're probably going to be throwing a ton in the 4th quarter, so if it ends up being garbage time performance where DK Metcalf gets it done, we'll still take it.
And then Jerry Jeudy, Denver, they're in a division that's loaded, and we know that, whether it be the quarterback position or just all of the talent there. Does that concern you? And where are you with the Denver Broncos? I feel like if they were in the NFC, we'd be talking them up a lot more, but they are in a very competitive and AFC West.
Yeah, this is where we'll ask Melissa Jacobs to cover her ears, because we're projecting the Broncos to finish last in that division, unfortunately, and it's not lack of talent, to be honest with you. It's just the toughest division in football. I think they're going to be somewhere between 8 and 10 games to win, but they'll need to throw a ton, and that's great for Jerry Jeudy. It's great for Russell Wilson. It's probably great for Cortland Sutton as well. That division is insane, and I think it's going to be a shootout the entire way. And unfortunately, I think that Russell Wilson comes in as maybe the 3rd best quarterback in that division, and he's going to have a tough time keeping up with Patrick Mahomes and Justin Herbert.
Yep, we appreciate that, Josh, and that's the thing there. That you're projecting Denver, and we'll talk more about this with some of these teams that aren't as good. Are they playing from behind? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you're on a team with a bad defense, you got to score points. You got to be throwing the football. Maybe not great for those running backs that need to grind it out. When you're talking about pass catchers and pass attempts, that could be important, could be very important for the Denver Broncos. Josh, thank you very much. We'll check in with you once again here as we move into the 15th round already. Josh is going to come up on the clock here with the New York Bodega Cats. So 15 rounds we're into at this point in time, and you're starting to see some backups here. I look at Matt Harmon's team and the fact that he has not backed up Mark Andrews. I don't think he will. This is also a time where you're going to grab those running backs. Obviously, we're this late in the draft, we're in timeshares. Can you find that diamond in the rough? Can you find that running back who maybe just needs a couple of weeks to come through for you? I have used the strategy many times in really the last decade of I'll get my number 1 running back and I'm going to figure out the rest. Remember, in this format, you only have to start 2 running backs. Joe Dolan talked about this earlier. I brought this up a lot throughout the years. I don't care where the points come from. If you want to start 2 tight ends because you have the flex spot, or you want to go that much deeper at wide receiver, that's all that matters. Just because you're not getting all your points from the running back or there's no balance, it doesn't matter. In the end, what does that total say? That's what matters the most. I think that's why with these flex spots, and maybe you're in a league with a super flex with the 2 quarterbacks or multiple flex spots, I've played in those, you can load up on best player available. Only 1 flex spot in this league, only 10 lineup spots, but 12 teams, and then those 8 bench spots. And we're starting to talk more about those bench spots right now. Jeff Radcliffe is on the clock. I want to get to him in a second after he makes this selection. He started things off with Derrick Henry, Diggs, DJ Moore, who's breaking up fights and then hopefully catching passes from Baker Mayfield this year. And as we move on, Deontay Johnson and, of course, Pittsburgh. We've talked about a bit of, new quarterback situation. Ben was obviously at the end of his career, but maybe there was a little bit of a safety blanket there. So I want to bring Jeff in now. Jeff picked 9th overall, Philadelphia Powder Kegs. Jeff, your thoughts right now. You got a couple of receivers here who will have new quarterbacks throwing to them. Very talented in DJ Moore and Deontay Johnson. How much does the new quarterback affect your expectations for those players?
It's a good question. I think the first question is, who is their quarterbacks? We really need to establish. We got to drill down on that one, Joe, first. I mean, we have possibly Trubisky, That doesn't instill much confidence. Maybe Mason Rudolph, but not much confidence there either. And Kenny Pickett, yeah, not much confidence. But you know what I believe in? I believe in talent, and good receivers can produce with bad quarterbacks. The quintessential example in the history of the NFL, Josh Gordon with who? Brandon Whedon? Was that who it was? Like, who?
Maybe some Derek Anderson at that stuff? Yeah, exactly.
It was ugly, but he had a monster season. We see it every year. Brandon Cooks last year. Nobody believed in Brandon Cooks. You got him for a bologna sandwich in drafts, and he ended up being rock solid, his most consistent season of his career. So I believe in that talent. I believe in 1,100 yards in each of the last 3 seasons. Now only 4 touchdowns in each of those years for DJ Moore. Talent for me more so than quarterback in those situations. And hey, I maybe got a little discount because of the quarterback situations, but I'll take it.
Jeff, you're on the clock right now, so I want to let you make that selection. We'll check in with you in a little bit. There you go. There's some thought there, folks. Talent can win, and maybe you're not always a believer in talent. An opportunity can be there as well. I should note that Jeff does have someone in Stephon Diggs, and he did something. You believe in the double rainbow. He does have Josh Allen on that team. If you want to get a piece, I talked to some big high-stakes players throughout the years, and one of the things that they believe in, I'm just going to draft from good teams. I'm going to draft from teams that I believe in, that are true contenders. If you get the Buffalo Bills, you're a big believer in the Buffalo Bills because we know what they did last year. We know that is an ascending team. Still can ascend based on what we saw last year. But a Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs combo, if you're going to play Jeff Ratcliffe and you're going to play the Philadelphia Powder Kegs, you're going to look across that lineup and go, oh, he's got Allen and Diggs. Oh, that's probably going to be a lot of points. If they're playing a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, are you going to feel that comfortable with a 60, 70-point lead knowing those two guys on the other side? Probably not. Sometimes you want to think about, okay, I have a supreme advantage at my position. Josh Allen might give that to Jeff. Second wide quarterback off the board, Justin Herbert went after that. Let's go back to the defending champions, the Atlanta Hot Wings. Joe, I want to come back to you on this one because you took Justin Herbert. He was your third quarterback off the board. You mentioned the fact that you took all those wide receivers early. We mentioned Kareem Hunt. Since then, you have been loading up at the running back position. What are your expectations here for the running backs you selected after Kareem Hunt, and just in terms of what your lineup might look like?
The odds are that we're going to get at least one of these guys who's playable on a weekly basis. Now, we took Cordero Patterson in the 10th round, Matt, and we took Cordero Patterson because we want somebody. Look, the Falcons stink. I understand that. That's why Cordero Patterson's a 10th round pick. But we need somebody to play in week 1. And he's going to have a role, and then hopefully one of these younger backs comes in, steps in. You know, Darrell Henderson, there's been talk with Sean McVay rotating him in. We know that's a great offense. Maybe Kareem Hunt gets traded. Maybe the camp hype on Eno Benjamin is real. You know, when you're drafting some of these running backs here, James Cook, by the way, is in a great offense, and they clearly wanted a pass-catching running back this offseason. They made that obvious. So when you're building a zero RB team, and you draft some of these running backs, like I haven't drafted Michael Carter maybe once all off season, but when you're building a team like this, you have to make a bull case argument for these running backs and try to convince yourself why it might be a good pick. Because we know our wide receiver is going to be good. We know that.
Right. Now, I want to ask you about that. A lot of the people that are watching, everybody in this room is in multiple leagues, and you mentioned not taking, I think, Michael Carter you don't have a lot of. How important is it to you when you're in multiple leagues to either get the players you want and or diversify what your rosters look like so you're not too in on one player?
Well, when I'm it's something I employ in best ball because I don't want to be overweight. And then this is actually my first redraft league of the year where I'm really drafting a team that I'm going to manage throughout the entire season. Maybe, you know, when I'm doing, let's still play with our buddies, right? Yeah. So I might just say, hey, I got a lot of Jamar Chase. Maybe I'll take somebody else in that spot. But for me, this is a league where I want to try to draft the best players. Whether or not I have too much of them, whether or not, you know, I haven't been on a guy because of my roster builds, does not play in at all on this team.
Thank you to Joe and the defending champion Atlanta Hot Wings for some insight there. Once again, you can construct your roster in a lot of different ways. I want to go back to the Vegas Pocket Kings and Jeff Mans. Started things off at the 11 spot here. And we talked a lot about, obviously, Joe Mixon. And I think we've seen the Bengals come up a little bit here. Jeff, I noticed you go on a little bit of a wide receiver run. There is a name I see here in Kenny Golladay. And if you're a Giants fan, you go, why did we give that guy all of that money? I hate Daniel Jones. but to you, this is your fourth wide receiver. Is that just, okay, I'll take Kenny Golladay in the fourth wide receiver spot, and if it doesn't work out, I'll find somebody else?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Obviously, he needs to stay healthy. If so, I think there's not that big of a difference. And I love Cortland Sutton, but that downfield, big downfield, jump ball type of guy, he can fill that role. Don't forget, the thing about the Giants, and we saw it in preseason week 1, Matt, is that this is a new offense with Brian DeBall. They're playing a spread offense. A lot of 3, 4, 5 wide receiver sets. So, yeah, Kadarius Toney, Wan'Dale Robinson are exciting on the inside. But you get that big body guy who they gave a ton of money to. And also the emergence of Daniel Jones, because Josh Allen had a kind of rough 2 seasons as well in Buffalo. Brian DeBall gets there, calms down his mechanics, gets him out of the pocket, moving where he's more rhythmic, and we saw Allen's career take off. I'm not saying Daniel Jones is on that level, but we can see improvement here in the passing game, and the volume's going to be there. They targeted, 16 receivers in week 1, so taking a shot at Kenny Golladay, I'm trying to talk myself into it.
All right, you're trying that, but I'll let you make your last couple picks here coming up. Jeff, we appreciate your insight there. Coming towards the end of the 17th round, one more round to go. Yes, now we'll start to see maybe some kickers and defenses come off the board. It might be a position a lot of our GMs are going to stream on a week-to-week basis. You look and say, this defense is playing a bad team. I'll play them in week 1, and I don't care about what happens in week 2. I'll get there when I get there. It's an okay strategy to employ. And by the way, some of your leagues may not require you to take a kicker in a defense. You figure that out right before week number 1. I would take full advantage of such a thing because you don't need that kicker or defense right away. You can go get them. Maybe you roster something. We are still a few weeks away from the start of the NFL season. Those roster spots in the last couple rounds could end up paying off in a very big way. If an injury or a trade were to happen, you could go find your kicker and defense at another time. And that's just an okay strategy to use. They're not going to win you fantasy championships. It just doesn't happen that way. So we're starting the 18th round here. I'm going to talk to Scott Engel after he makes the last pick of his draft, because he will be the first team we can take a look at the entire roster and see how he feels. And Scott, let's bring in Scott right now. Of the Seattle Hayes, Scott, your team is done. You have 18 rounds in the books. Just generally, you finished up. How do you feel?
I feel good about it. I feel like I drafted a very balanced roster. I like the way that the starters worked out. Waited on my quarterback, maybe not as long as some other people, but love having Dak Prescott at quarterback. You can't wait much later than the 8th round at tight end, but I felt like I got some really good depth. I took some risks with getting Isaiah Pacheco, I believe in the 12th round, but like I said before, Matt, when you're playing, with the level of players that we have in this league, you have to take some chances, you have to take some risks. And I think what was interesting is we all should, project this to everybody out there. When you get to the final rounds, the final 2 rounds, you can't ignore your picks and just throw darts like some people do sometimes. A lot of us were looking at the schedules of the defenses. Right. Because people will pick a defense based on where they're ranked overall, but a lot of us stream defenses don't have the same defense all year. So we were looking at the early season schedules. I took the 49ers. Then with kickers, just don't throw darts at them, because the best ones can help you win a week when your skill position players don't step up enough.
I want to ask about Pacheco, because there's been a lot of buzz for a guy who was drafted on day 3. And it's preseason. This will happen. And we'll never hear from these players ever again. And sometimes these players will end up playing an important role, maybe not right away, but you're talking about a player on one of the best offenses in football. How much does that play into it? Do you believe in the hype of somebody like that who went so late in the NFL draft?
Well, you have to consider the team that he's playing on. And it's not out of the question for a late round pick to make it. Those who watch the Seahawks know that Chris Carson was a 7th round pick. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has proved he cannot be a feature back. That he's smaller, he's not durable, unfortunately. The Chiefs are probably going to have to use 2 running backs. Ronald Jones not having a good preseason, and there's rumors that Jones might not even make the team. Pacheco's having a great camp, and with a lot of coaches, what they see in camp, not where they drafted the guy, will sometimes dictate whether he's going to make the roster. Sure. If you use preseason and training camp to impress the coaching staff, you will get a shot.
That's a big part of it. Scott, we thank you for your insight there. Even though New York thinks you're a traitor, that's okay. You got to go where the money is. That's where it is. We're at Seattle. I would like to go back to Lindsey Rhodes and the Green Bay Winter Warriors. And Lindsey said earlier she was kind of chasing after she took those 3 running backs to get things going. So, Lindsey, now that your team is done and finished off, do you feel better? Do you kind of wish you would have changed things up in those first 3 rounds?
No, I think it ended up fine. I had to grab a lot of wide receivers, I think, to make up for the lack of like a surefire number 1 that I'm completely confident is going to crush it on a week-to-week basis. But I think I did get a lot of people, and I left my options open there. The wide receivers that I ended up taking early were all guys who had like high volume, probably wide receiver 1 guys in their offenses. I didn't want to take any swings at any of the young guys until I had people that I knew I could plug in. So that kind of changed my build a little bit. I took Dalton Schultz when he was on the board in the 6th round. I was really hoping to grab a quarterback because I couldn't believe that the quarterbacks actually lasted that long. And then we talked, when we talked last time, but to finish my thought, sorry, the quarterbacks that I wanted there came off right before I actually picked. So I like the value of Dalton Schultz in that spot. I backed him up with Pat Freiermuth a little bit later on in the draft when I thought that he was the best guy on the board, even though I already had somebody at that position. So now I have 2 tight ends that I could choose from and or become trade bait or put into the flex spot. We talked about whether or not I was going to back up Joe Burrow, maybe for the start of the season if necessary. And I do like the fact that I was able to grab Matt Stafford in the 12th round, who could, all things being equal, be my starting quarterback and or become trade bait. So I do like the wide receivers that I ended up with. I think ended up with a lot of them. I didn't end up with as many young guys as I normally do. Like sometimes I'll have like a couple of those wide receiver rookie flyers, and I didn't end up with any of those guys. The way that the build just played out, that's not my usual build. But again, just kind of go with the flow, and I think it all turned out fine.
Thank you very much, Lindsey, for joining us, and good luck this year. And that's a great example, everybody, as this draft has now concluded. You kind of have to be fluid. You have to play to the board. We get these questions all the time. It's been brought up a lot today. I'm in the 4th round. What do you think will be? I don't know. And look at what happened with some of these, the best in the business, shocked by what happened in the 1st round, seeing Justin Jefferson go, and as we look at the board, how things changed after that. And I always think the colors are interesting to look at. You see the runs of the quarterbacks we saw in the 5th and the 6th round, and then other teams being able to wait. Okay, all those teams have a quarterback. You not only have to play the board, but you have to look at what's going on with the other teams. Well, they took a starting quarterback. I know I'm coming up here right after them. They're not going to take another one. Maybe I can wait a little bit. Playing the board, playing the GMs, and for those of you at home, playing against the heart, because some people will draft with their heart instead of their head, and you need to take advantage of all that. This is over. This draft is completed, but we are just getting started with Season 2 of the HOFL. Get the app right now. You want to be part of this. 2 different contests, DFS paying out $750, $500, and $250 a week, and $75,000 in the other contest. This is what you want to be a part of here at the HOFL. Check out, of course, get here. The Hall of Fame Village, there's so much happening here. The growth is unbelievable, and we were so happy to be able to present to you this draft. Follow all of our social media at the HOFL all season long to track the league, to get insight from some of these genius minds in the world of fantasy football. We are just getting started on another great season. Season number 2, we're doubling down, 10 teams to 12. You got to see all of it today. I am Matt Campa, and thank you for joining us for Season 2 of the HOFL Draft. Have a good day, buddy.